Imagine a city built on dreams, now grappling with an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Over 160,000 asylum seekers have arrived in New York City, overwhelming shelters and resources. How is the city handling the surge? And why are buses of migrants arriving overnight without notice? Discover the hidden stories behind the headlines and the city's fight for federal support. Stay with us as we uncover the complex reality of the migrant crisis that's reshaping New York. New York City, known for its towering skyline and vibrant culture, now faces one of the most complex challenges in its modern history. With over 160,000 migrants arriving since 2022, the city is struggling to accommodate the sheer influx. Shelters are overflowing, public resources are stretched thin, and the city's sanctuary reputation is being tested like never before. Mayor Eric Adams has called this an unparalleled crisis, warning that it could destroy New York City if left unaddressed. The federal government has been slow to respond, leaving local leaders and residents grappling with the fallout. This video dives deep into the policies, politics, and personal stories behind the ongoing crisis. From sanctuary city ideals to interstate political battles, we're breaking down every angle for you. In spring 2022, the arrival of over 210,000 migrants began making headlines. Many came from Latin America, fleeing violence, economic instability, and environmental disasters. Others traveled from Africa and Asia, seeing New York City as a beacon of hope and opportunity. The city's sanctuary status, long a source of pride, quickly became a focal point for debate. According to City State New York, immigrants already make up 37% of New York's population, contributing significantly to the workforce. But with shelters at capacity and public schools facing overcrowding, tensions have risen. Residents worry about the long-term implications, even as many New Yorkers rally to support these new arrivals. In April 2022, Texas Governor Greg Abbott took a controversial step, busing migrants released from federal custody to sanctuary cities like New York. Abbott argued that southern border states shouldn't bear the burden alone and began sending thousands of migrants to Democratic-led cities, including New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. As of early 2024, Texas has spent over $148 million on this program, transporting over 100,000 migrants. Mayor Adams accused Abbott of exacerbating the crisis, calling it a political stunt. Abbott responded by doubling down, stating that New York's sanctuary policies invite these challenges. The interstate feud reached new heights as both sides dug in, turning migrants into pawns in a larger political game. New York City is facing an unprecedented financial burden due to the ongoing migrant crisis, with expenses projected to surpass $10 billion by the end of 2024. Mayor Eric Adams has highlighted the sheer scale of the challenge, labeling it a crisis that threatens the city's social and economic infrastructure. This monumental cost includes housing, food, healthcare, education, and administrative support, all of which are necessary to address the needs of over 160,000 new arrivals. Shelters have reached capacity, prompting the city to improvise by converting hotels, offices, and even large public spaces into temporary housing. According to city officials, over 200 facilities have been repurposed, including high-profile hotels that once catered to tourists. Yet, these efforts still fall short. Families are crammed into crowded spaces, with some even sleeping on sidewalks outside city shelters. Critics argue that such measures are unsustainable, especially with winter approaching and no clear end to the crisis in sight. To mitigate the humanitarian fallout, New York launched a controversial prepaid debit card program in early 2024. Migrant families were issued cards loaded with up to $350 weekly, intended to cover essential needs like food, clothing, and transportation. While this initiative initially provided relief, it was met with backlash from various groups. Long-term residents facing similar financial hardships question the fairness of prioritizing new arrivals. Public discourse became polarized, with some seeing the program as a compassionate response and others viewing it as a misuse of taxpayer money. By mid-May 2024, the program was discontinued due to severe budget constraints. the city redirected these funds toward maintaining shelters and food services, a decision that further fueled debates over resource allocation. Critics argue that discontinuing the debit card program only adds to the plight of migrant families, leaving them more vulnerable to exploitation and poverty. On the other hand, supporters of the move claim that the city's resources are already stretched thin, requiring tough prioritization. Compounding these issues is the strain on healthcare and education systems. Public hospitals are grappling with increased patient loads as many migrants arrive with unmet medical needs. Schools have been inundated with new students, many of whom require additional language and learning support. The city's educators and healthcare workers are overworked, and unions have begun calling for federal assistance to alleviate the pressure. Despite these efforts, New York's financial outlook remains grim. Federal aid has been limited, and state-level contributions fall far short of what is needed. Mayor Adams has repeatedly called for a coordinated federal response, including expedited work permits for migrants, to reduce their dependency on city programs. However, political gridlock at the national level has left these pleas largely unanswered, forcing New York to rely on its own dwindling resources. The situation has also sparked tensions among residents. Many New Yorkers, known for their resilience and generosity, continue to volunteer their time and resources to assist migrants. Community organizations have stepped in to provide meals, clothing, and legal aid. However, others argue that the crisis is eroding the city's quality of life, with crime rates and homelessness visibly rising in certain areas. Faced with an overwhelming influx of migrants, New York City has initiated a reticketing program, offering one-way tickets to other states, including Texas. By October 2024, over 47,000 tickets had been issued under this initiative. Officials defend the program as an opportunity for migrants to relocate to areas with better job prospects or to reunite with family members. They argue that this approach respects migrants' autonomy while alleviating the city's strained resources. Critics, however, view this program as a contradictory measure that undermines New York's identity as a sanctuary city. For decades, New York has been celebrated as a haven for immigrants, yet this policy is perceived by some as shifting the burden onto other states rather than addressing the root issues. Detractors also point out the lack of comprehensive support for migrants once they arrive in their new destinations, which could leave them vulnerable and unprepared for resettlement. The program highlights the severe strain on the city's infrastructure. Housing shortages, skyrocketing costs, and limited social services have made it increasingly difficult for New York to accommodate new arrivals. This situation has forced city leaders to make controversial decisions under mounting public pressure, reflecting the broader challenges of balancing humanitarian commitments with practical limitations. Beyond the logistical challenges, the program has fueled political debates. States receiving these migrants, particularly Texas, have expressed frustration, accusing New York of offloading its responsibilities. This tension underscores the lack of a unified national strategy to address the migrant crisis, leaving states and cities at odds over policies and solutions. Ultimately, the reticketing program illustrates the complexity of managing an unprecedented migration wave. While it provides temporary relief for New York, the move also signals the urgent need for coordinated efforts at state and federal levels to develop sustainable, long-term solutions for both migrants and host communities. New York City's leaders, including Mayor Eric Adams, have repeatedly emphasized the need for robust federal intervention to address the ongoing migrant crisis. Adams has called for immediate action, such as expedited work authorizations for asylum seekers, to help them transition from dependency on city resources to self-sufficiency. However, these requests have largely been met with limited responses, leaving local governments to manage an issue of national scope with inadequate resources. The federal government has allocated some emergency funding to cities like New York, but it falls short of covering the staggering costs. For example, the Federal Emergency Management Agency (FEMA) disbursed over $100 million to support the migrant crisis in 2024, but this is a fraction of the $10 billion estimated expenses New York faces by the fiscal year's end. This funding gap has created a growing strain on local budgets and infrastructure, forcing city officials to make difficult decisions about resource allocation. Advocates argue that these piecemeal responses highlight the need for comprehensive immigration reform. They contend that without addressing systemic issues, such as delays in asylum processing and the lack of a cohesive national strategy, the crisis will persist. Federal immigration policies remain fragmented, with states and cities often left to interpret and implement guidelines without sufficient clarity or support. Moreover, political gridlock in Congress has stalled broader immigration reform. Partisan divisions have prevented progress on legislation aimed at streamlining asylum applications, increasing border security, and allocating resources to high-impact areas. This stalemate not only exacerbates the crisis, but also places undue pressure on cities like New York, which are forced to act as first responders in a federal issue. The lack of federal action has sparked debates about responsibility and equity, while some argue that sanctuary cities voluntarily assume these challenges. Others assert that immigration is a national matter, requiring unified solutions. Mayor Adams and other leaders have joined a growing coalition of city officials nationwide calling for federal task forces and sustained funding to manage the crisis. In the absence of sufficient federal intervention, New York has sought innovative but temporary solutions. For example, city leaders have petitioned for policy changes that would allow migrants to work legally, thereby reducing their reliance on public assistance. However, these measures face bureaucratic delays and lack the support of a comprehensive federal framework, leaving New York to navigate a complex and worsening humanitarian challenge largely on its own. This dynamic underscores the urgent need for a coordinated federal approach, not just to alleviate the burden on cities, but to create sustainable, long-term solutions. Until then, New York remains a focal point in a crisis that reflects broader national and global challenges, with local governments bearing the brunt of what should be a shared responsibility. Amid the chaotic political discourse surrounding New York's migrant crisis, it is easy to lose sight of the deeply human narratives involved. Thousands of migrants have risked their lives, fleeing violence, war, and dire poverty in search of safety and hope. Many families, including young children and elderly individuals, now find themselves in a precarious position, relying on limited city resources. Their stories are a poignant reminder of the resilience and determination it takes to pursue a better future, even when faced with uncertainty. In this environment, grassroots organizations have emerged as lifelines. Local charities and volunteer networks provide essential support, offering food, clothing, and legal aid to those in need. These efforts highlight the enduring generosity of New Yorkers, who step up even in challenging circumstances. These personal acts of kindness reflect the city's unique spirit, a combination of resilience and compassion, offering a glimpse of humanity amid the crisis. As the crisis unfolds, New York City stands at a crossroads. Will it find innovative solutions to uphold its sanctuary ideals while managing its strained resources, or will political battles and limited federal support push the city into further chaos? This situation isn't just about New York, it's a reflection of broader national and global challenges. Immigration, resource distribution, and social equity are issues that require collective action. For now, the city remains a symbol of resilience and struggle, embodying the complexities of a rapidly changing world. Stay tuned as we continue to monitor this evolving story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Discovering the Earth for more in-depth coverage of the world's most pressing issues. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think New York can navigate this crisis?